finished a doctorate in 1976. And then Ken and I started a management consulting company in California in 1978. I am now the president of that company. We have about 65 employees. The wonderful thing about that is that I am learning firsthand how all these things that we teach work in practice. And while they're not as easy as we sometimes believe that they might be, they do work when you practice them.
That's great.
So,
that's great. Well, obviously Ken Blanchard is your husband,
right,
and he has written The 1 Minute Manager, which I think almost everybody, if they haven't read any other management book, they probably have read The 1 Minute Manager.
Right.
And I think it's tremendously popular.
Well, one of the things that we heard some research, which was very interesting, that most nonfiction books, in fact, less than 10% of nonfiction books are read beyond the first chapter.
Oh.
So the 1 Minute Manager is one chapter long, and what it's done is it's allowed people who really weren't, quote, management students to pick up the book and read it. And since we're all managers, we manage our lives, we manage our children, we manage ourselves, it's had a very, very wide application.
I think that's true. I want to talk about the popularity a little bit later, but I'm really interested in this life planning course that you did, because our Women's Center here at the college offers that as a service.
Oh, wonderful.
And we've had many, many people go back to school and change their lives, and, and maybe not become as famous as you are, Marjorie, but have done some really, significant things.
Well, I recommend life planning classes. In fact, when I teach strategies for balancing a complex life, which is certainly something that everyone identifies with, one of the big things that I stress to people is that sometimes if you go back to school or you go into a class, like a life planning class, it's easier to explore those little beginning ideas about what I want to do and where I want to be and how I'd like to be spending my time in the future. And the problem is that if you, let's say you have an idea, let's say there's a woman who's thinking about going back to school or maybe getting her resume together and looking for a job. Unfortunately, what happens is that the first person she might turn to for support in that, baby idea is her best friend. Except her best friend's also her tennis partner.
Oh dear.
And so her best friend might say, well, Margie, that's a wonderful idea. I think you should, look for a job. Everybody I know that's looked for a job has gotten a divorce. And so down your energy goes. And then you wait a little while, and maybe after a while you mention it to your children. And your children say, that's a wonderful idea, Mommy. Does that mean I have to be a latchkey child?
Oh, good.
And wear a key around my neck? And by now, if you haven't completely lost your energy, after a while you ask your husband, or you mention it to your husband, and he said, gee, honey, that's a terrific idea. What about that 3-week trip that we'd like to take to Tahiti? They don't give vacations the first year of any job. And so what happens is that you get sabotaged. You get sabotaged by the people in your environment who want you to stay the same, even though they think that they are supporting you. And that sabotage, combined with your own sabotage, which is plenty,
certainly
helps you not to move off of dead center. And one of the things that's nice about a class like a life planning class is that you explore some of those options. You think about where you might do and where you might do and what you might do it. You sort of get a plan of action. You get your energy organized, and nobody feels like their life is going to be discombobulated or upset if you make changes. And so you get to do some of that exploratory work without really having to face some of that subtle sabotage that I think a lot of us have in our lives.
In fact, the peer support is more the other direction. It's more like really make a change.
Right.
You're too conservative. Go for the bigger, better.
And sometimes people can help you see skills in yourself that you never even really realized have fallen into a pattern. I think it's a very helpful process to go through in terms of life planning. And I really don't believe we can do it often enough. I think each of us, if we went into a class like that every 5 years.
Every 5?
Really, I don't think it would hurt us.
Yeah. You don't think that's true about the divorce then? Getting the job causes the divorce as opposed to the other direction. I've heard these little sabotages a lot.
Well, sure. And I think each of us, if we're aware of what we're getting into, can take steps to prevent something like that, yes, I think it does add stress to a relationship. I think change does add stress. But if you understand change, and you understand that there are some predictable reactions to change, like one of the predictable reactions is a feeling of loss. I just read a book by Mort Shavitz called Sexual Static. And one of the main themes in the book was that men are feeling a kind of a loss as their wives go out and, you know, have busy careers and certainly are still working at home and have children, and there's very little time left for them. And so if you went into something understanding that there might be that feeling of loss, you might feel some of the loss, then you could do something about it. Then you could be more intentional about planning family time, you know, really using your time to best advantage.
Right. Play tennis on Saturdays, which you might not have worked in. Try not to lose your friends.
Find activities that you both enjoy together. But it's a matter of understanding. Another feeling that people have in change is that there aren't enough resources. I don't have enough time, I don't have enough whatever. And so if you understand that's going to be your reaction, then when it happens, instead of believing, well, that must mean that this isn't right for me, all you do then is say, well, here comes that feeling that says I'm not going to have enough resources. And generally, most of us have more resources than we think. We have friends, we have other courses we can take. We aren't as alone as a lot of people feel that they are in a changed situation. And there are other very definite feelings that people have as they manage change, or hopefully learn to manage change. And that way, I think you can deal with these feelings that you might have, which you might not understand, and could, of course, lead to things like divorce.
So if you're prepared, then you're better able to respond.
Exactly. And be able to say, aha, there's that feeling.
That's right. So you're prepared. That's great. Well, let's prepare a little bit for balancing a complicated life, too.
That's right.
I mean, I can't think of a busier time. If you're not busy, you're sort of out of it anyway. So maybe everybody's trying to get on the track of being too busy. What do you think, and what can you suggest?
Well, when I ask people, do they have a complicated life, everybody raises their hand. And then I ask people, are they waiting for it to all slow down before they do anything about their complicated life, before they exercise, which they know will be a stress reducer, or spend quality time on a regular level with the people that really mean something to them? And that's pretty much what people are doing. They're waiting until it all slows down. And the reality is it's not. It's going to get worse. You're probably like me when I go home after this trip. I'm going to have a stack of opportunities on my desk when I get home, and even at home, of things I can do, products I can buy, places I can go, and ways that I can improve myself, my family, my appearance, everything. And so there's never going to be less offered. In fact, there will probably be more offered. So what we've got to do is to say, what are the most important areas of our lives? And how are each of those areas doing right now? In my class, I use a PACT model. One of the things we're finding is that people who can endure a lot of change in their lives, people who don't get sick, for instance, if they've had a lot of change over a 12-month period, have 4 ingredients that are in their lives that are very, very important to them. And that spells this PACT model: perspective, autonomy, connectedness, and tone. And the more you can enhance each of those ingredients, perspective you could enhance by taking a career planning class. Autonomy you could enhance by learning skills, becoming a better manager, or learning the skills that go into being a better parent, learning to use a computer, learning to be a better public speaker.
That's true.
Things that would help you feel like you have options, choices. Under C is the connectedness in our life, and that's what the 1 Minute Manager was all about. It's about catching people doing things right rather than wrong, and building good relationships at the home and at the office. The #1 predictor, unfortunately, of health at the work site is the relationship you have with your boss. If you have a good relationship with your boss, then you're likely to have, first of all, good health, and second of all, be feeling good about going to work. If you have a poor relationship with your boss, then my suggestion is to do something about it. To either go in, if you can, and sit down and say to your boss, you know, can we have a meeting so that we can agree on what my priorities are and what a good job would look like? Can you put your boss's behavior in perspective? Is he or she really all that bad? Some way that you can deal with the feelings that you have and make sure that you are on the right track. And then the T in the PEC model is tone. And that has to do with your physical body. It has to do with your energy level, your lifestyle habits, whether you take care of yourself, even what you wear. You look so pretty today, that beautiful blue color. And I would bet that the day you put that suit on, you're going to be more lively and more alive than the day that you choose the ugliest thing in your wardrobe. You know, the thing that you only wear to the meetings that you don't want to be elected something, you know, whatever it is. So
that's right.
It makes a difference how we look. And what I'm noticing is that when people have high perspective, high autonomy, high connectedness, and high tone, they have a lot of resistance to stress. And also, generally, they feel like they have a balanced life.
That's great.
It works. It works for me, anyway. I know that.
Well, that's wonderful. And you've got about as hectic a life as anybody, flying in from California and going all these places. Right. What about mothers or single mothers or mothers with children that are small still? Do you have any special pointers for that kind of a lifestyle?
Well, that's probably a time when your autonomy is lower than it would be or will be when your children go off to first grade or even to college, where my children are right now. So I think you need to understand, first of all, that that's going to be a special challenge in your life, the autonomy part. One thing that would be helpful then is to make sure that your connectedness stays high. Take advantage of any opportunities you have for reaching out and being reached out to in terms of friends. Make sure your tone doesn't get way down. Make sure that you don't let yourself get way out of shape physically. And hopefully spend some time thinking, this is a very special period of time in my life. I'm home with these children. I'm choosing to be home with the children, if possible. They are certainly going to grow up more quickly than I like. So in some way, choosing what's already happening to you. I heard a wonderful story about Beverly Sills. And she was giving a concert in San Francisco. And one of the reporters came up to her and said, "Miss Sills, I'll bet," she was doing this in the afternoon, and the reporter says, "I'll bet you hate the fact that you have to give another concert tonight." And Miss Sills said, "I don't have to give another concert tonight." And the reporter says, "Yes, you do. It's right here on the program." And Miss Sills says, "I don't have to give another concert tonight. I get to give another concert tonight. I used to go around saying, I have to do this, and I have to take so-and-so to the plane, and I have to take my child to ballet or to school late or something like that. Or I have to give a concert." And I finally realized that people all over this city were getting babysitters. They were getting their best clothes on, and they were coming to hear me sing. I get to give another concert tonight. And you would be surprised at the number of times when I'm driving to the airport in a rush and I'm saying, I get to go to Toronto tonight. And it feels like you become in control of your life. You become the one who's choosing your life, who's realizing that you have some options.
In fact, you chose to go to Toronto some months back,
Exactly.
And now...
And you're going because I'm going to get to do what I love to do. And so the more that you can feel like you have those options, and sometimes having those options has to do with developing skills, sometimes taking a parenting class, sometimes getting yourself into some kind of a class where even though you may be home, you're developing some back burner skills, maybe learning to use a computer or practicing your typing or something, so that when another stage in your life comes, you're going to be able to move into that stage and feel like you've done some preparation.
That's true. That's true. I think a lot of people are under stresses in all parts of their lives, then I think it's an attitude,
Exactly.
partly.
Really.
Partly it's an attitude, getting to go to work as opposed to having to go to work.
And some people do have to go to work.
That's
I
right.
mean, absolutely. And some people have to work 2 jobs instead of 1. Or they have to, they are single parents. And we have a lot of single mothers working in our company. And one of the things I notice is that they have this full work life. And then they pick up their child on the way home from work. And they get home and they're tired. And too tired, they think, to have a friend over or to leave their children again, to exercise, or to do some of the things that they think are good for them. And so one of the things that we've been trying to encourage the people who have that kind of a busy single life who work for us is to take advantage of the time when they're in the office to maybe get their exercise done. We have a walking group at noon, and 35, 40 minutes of brisk walking and maybe 10 or 15 minutes of eating that salad is going to be a lot better for you than really hoping that you're going to get it done at work, but secretly knowing that you're never going to get it done. And we have some companies are putting in wellness programs, and we're helping those companies to say, how can you do a wellness program? How can you put something in to your company that will provide support for people to work on their good intentions without having to build a gym, without having to put in a lot of fancy equipment. If you want to put in the equipment, great, we'll help you with that. But there's a lot that people can do at the work site to support people's efforts to act on their good intentions. And even a spontaneous aerobic dancing class after work. We have a great big video screen, and some of our employees put on Jane Fonda or one of the other exercise tapes, and they do it together.
Without a real instructor in a real class or anything like that. Just
and they do it after hours, and it means that they're a half hour late getting home, but at least they've gotten their exercise in. Plus, they get to know each other better.
Well, that's true. It sounds like you don't have to go by yourself and do all these things. You're not giving up your lunch hour. You're just incorporate some other activity.
That's right.
That's great. Well, let's talk a little bit about management techniques and some pointers maybe for getting better at a skill. What kinds of things would you think people ought to start with?
I think managing is one of the most exciting things that people try to do, either with their children, themselves, or certainly in the way we traditionally see it. And I think that the key to feeling good about what's happening at the office is a good performance appraisal system. Now, most people hate that. Most people, if you ask them, how is your performance appraisal system? How do people find out how they're doing? How do they have a good feeling about how they're moving forward in their career? Most people say, I hate it. In fact, most performance appraisal systems start out with a form.
That's right.
Personnel comes up with a form, and once a year, the manager sits down and checks off aspects of the person's performance. And the manager doesn't like it, and certainly the person who is being managed doesn't like it. And then somebody gets creative and they say, well, maybe we ought to set goals. So then they set goals. They set goals, and some companies really get into goal setting. They hire professional goal writers, and they have pages of goals. But even the companies who do it right, who set a reasonable number of goals, and who might have measurable goals, which are even better, and might even have performance standards. How will you and I know that you're doing a good job in this aspect of your job? So now we get our goals down. Very, very important. But what usually doesn't happen in the whole performance appraisal or the whole management process is that day-to-day coaching and counseling. Mm-hmm. That day-to-day giving people the right amount of direction and the right amount of support that helps them to do the various aspects of what you'd agreed is their job in a way that they get feedback and they know how they're doing. Because it's really, you don't use the same management style, and people don't need the same management style for all of the various parts of their job. Mm-hmm. I hate to tell people, but it's not only is it different strokes for different folks, but it's different strokes for the same folks.
It's going to be more complicated.
Initially.
All right.
Because you're going to do performance planning. You're going to set the goals. You're going to look at, what would a good job look like. Then you're going to say, how are you at doing this? Have you done it before? How excited are you at, doing task A or doing task B or running department C? How good are you at both doing it, and then how motivated are you, and how committed, and how confident are you? And so you have a dialogue. Any kind of management training teaches people skills that the manager doesn't do to them, the manager does it with them. Talks about it. Let's come up with these goals, and then we'll talk about how can I give you what you need, or how can I arrange for you to get the training you need. And so that's the performance planning. You do the day-to-day coaching and counseling, and then when you move into the review period, the performance review.
That's right.
No new news.
That's right. All just feedback.
All just review of what you've already given. And I'll tell you, when you get a process like that going, people get excited. They feel like they really know how they're doing, what a good job looks like. They're getting feedback. Certainly the message of the 1 Minute Manager was 1 minute praisings and 1 minute reprimands if you get off track a little bit. But we know that in healthy organizations, there are 4 times as many praisings than reprimands.
In healthy organizations.
And healthy relationships.
Right.
And so you have to ask yourself, every time I choose somebody out or redirect a teenager, have I caught that person doing something right 4 times? Or approximately right with teenagers. But, am I looking for the positive? Am I looking to give people the good news when I see them doing their own job, not an unusual job, but even their own job in a way that we've agreed upon.
Right. Many times managers think that people, the reason that they're there, the managees, if you will, get in the way. They take too much time. What kind of pointers do you have for somebody with an attitude like that?
I don't think there's anything more important. I think even this initial goal setting meeting, most people say, oh, it just would take too much time. But if you don't set goals with people and you don't sit down with them and get agreement on what their goals are, then if they don't do what it is that you had hoped, you never know whether it's because they didn't understand what they were supposed to do or didn't agree that that was something that they were supposed to do, or whether they're just goofing off. And today especially, you can almost not fire somebody. You cannot fire somebody if you go back, or it's very difficult if you go back and you see a whole bunch of performance reviews that have excellent, 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 just because nobody's taken the time or wanted to deal with real goals and real performance. So I think not only is it important for productivity, it's very important for the fair treatment of people to be able to show that you've set goals, you've got an agreement, you've determined how you are going to help that person or what kind of leadership style you're going to give them. And then you have a fair performance review. Otherwise, there's just a lot that we can be worried about today in terms of lawsuits, all kinds of things.
Do you see any differences in large or small organizations using this same technique? Many of these entrepreneurs have just sort of come up and they've had no formal skills training. They're good at selling or whatever they're doing, and they need this piece. Where would you suggest they get this piece of management training?
Well, I agree. Sometimes there isn't formal training available. The exciting things about being an entrepreneur is you're very close to the action, and so are all your people. And that sometimes helps them to forgive a few technicalities. Being close to the action, seeing that what they do that day really helps. If they don't answer that phone, they're going to lose that sale. That's a very exciting part of being in an entrepreneurial organization. So you can be forgiven sometimes. Eventually, though, you have to, I think, really be able to sit down and maybe do some self-help work, read something like the 1 Minute Manager, do some self-study. There's a book that we wrote called Leadership in the 1 Minute Manager, which pretty much just in as easy a fashion details what you need to do to do this planning and then coaching and review process. If you learn better in a class, though, and many of us do, I would suggest that you take that aspect of your life seriously and you say, if I can manage that art of leadership, every day is going to be better. And I would trundle off to a class. I would trundle off to a workshop and have an opportunity to develop those skills so that I would feel more that that was a controlled and exciting part of my life. Even parents who go to parenting classes learn skills that they can use on an everyday level so that they're not always reinventing the wheel.
Well, a lot of what you learn in parenting is management also.
Oh, and a lot of what we learn in management applies to parenting.
That's
a
right.
A lot of people say it's easier to start at home than it is at the office.
Well, at least you can practice there and people forgive you a lot easier.
I know,
The mistakes don't seem to haunt you quite as much. I think that's true. Well, I have to say that we're out of time, and I really appreciate your being here. I'm excited about the information you've given us today.
Good.
And I think a lot of people would be interested in reading something as short and as meaningful. You know, sometimes when you start off reading the 1 Minute Manager, you might get into more and more in depth and try some things and then want some feedback.
Right. And what's nice about that book is it's written in a parable.
That's right.
It's a story, and it's something you can read in an hour.
That's right.
And you're right, it could make you a beginning management student.
That's right. And then, of course, we're all management students, no matter how many degrees we have or how many jobs we've had. We're always management students. I think you're right. Well, thank you very much for being with us, Marjorie Blanchard. And thank you all for joining us. This is the Women's Center. I'm Carol Miner, the Dean of Open Campus, thanking you for being with us on Worth Quoting at Florida Community College of Jacksonville. Thank you.